All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar on sustainable operations for content services. I'm Sean Allen, and lucky enough to run marketing over here at Reveille, and I'll be running through a presentation today that talks about the role of operations and content services and how Reveille can help. First, we're going to kick off. Those who have been in the prior one or two sessions of this webinar series on active insight for content will recognize how we're going to kick off here. I'm going to begin with an overview of the market migration from enterprise content management to content services platforms, and then I'll branch into a comparison of general purpose tools and purpose-built solutions. And then after that short intro, we'll spend the balance of the session talking about enhancing and sustaining content services operations. So with that, I'll kick directly off and get into it so we can get to the meat of the session. So first of all, we wanted to take a look at what's happening grand scale in the marketplace and the changing ECM marketplace. As we all know, ECM has been around for a very long time, and it's been serving a very distinct purpose. Right? It was traditionally built as a back office content manager, right, where its primary goal was providing that platform for compliance, for workflow, for managing the content and its flow inside of an enterprise. And it was generally done as a single solution coming from a single vendor. And so, you know, basically I would generally make a single vendor solution and they would be my repository solution. I wouldn't have pockets of other things going on inside of my organization. But as an evolution of that ECM environment, that content platform has evolved, and it's a consolidation of these content-related services with an acknowledgement that there are multiple solutions now from multiple vendors, which is great, because what that means is that organizations get an opportunity to leverage each different vendor to their strength. And whether we wanted to or not, over time, a collection of these happened in our organization, whether they be through shadow IT, through M&A, through a variety of different reasons, or just trying a new approach. So the shift that we've seen is we're still solving the same ECM problems, but we're kind of moving those platforms, those solutions, those applications into the area of systems of record, right, where you need those things to be steady and concrete, whereas the applications now that you're creating on the front end need to leverage those services, but the pace at which you create those applications and offer them to your constituents, whether those be employees, partners, customers, or other, is significantly faster. So what does that mean for our world? Because when you add these complex systems together from these, when you add complex systems and multiple solutions from countless vendors with these new requirements, and we can talk a little bit about new requirements in that it is no longer okay to send everybody into the repository to get the content that they want. You need to be creating in this consumerization of IT or appification of the enterprise or whatever fun, fancy words we want to use to describe the fact that we're all spoiled by the apps that we have on our phone, and enterprise users and constituents are demanding those, and those new requirements that drive the competitive stance of my organization added to all of this other stuff tends to equal, unfortunately, a poor experience, because as I increase the speed at which I create these applications, the apps themselves sometimes aren't great or aren't performing correctly, or this different environment has, or I should say this complex environment with multiple different moving parts has created security holes and gaps. It was a little easier to secure a single vendor's solution. It gets exponentially harder when I start adding multiple vendors into the mix that and need to coordinate across all of that, which, as we all know, creates chaos in an already chaotic IT organization and a loss in productivity. Because if I have poor experience, if I have these security holes, if IT can't keep up, then the net result of that is a business impact of losing productivity. So to solve these solutions, you may be thinking to yourself, don't I already have something for that? And the answer is, yeah, you have general purpose tools. The problem, however, is that as great as they are, they don't bring a contextual understanding of your content services environment. They don't understand the entire solution stack, and I don't just mean the infrastructure. I mean inside the application, the components and how they're supposed to communicate with one another, how quickly that's supposed to be, what the flow is supposed to look like, et cetera. They generally don't gather user behavior information, certainly not in the context of that behavior. And all of that comes together into an analogy that we like to use on why context matters. Right? And it's done in the analogy of a house fire, or frankly, a house. And whether you're outside the house or you're inside the house. So if you have something, and in this example, outside the house is a general purpose tool because they're not inside the application or inside the house. When they notice a fire is occurring is when windows start breaking, smoke starts billowing out, and flames start taking the house down. However, if we change where we're standing, by putting somebody inside that house and arming them with a series of sensors and alarms and an intimate knowledge of the floor plan and design of that house and hand them a fire hose, it's pretty easy to see that being in that house with that context puts anyone in a much better position to put out any fire that might come up. It doesn't obviate the need for somebody outside the house because they're watching a much larger neighborhood, but we're watching just these specific houses when you need that level of depth. And so as we move from the analogy back into the reality, right, what is fire? Well, it's those things that we talked about earlier that were the result of this new chaos, this new and increased chaos in the environment around poor experience, chaotic IT, security holes, and all leading to a loss of productivity. So as we transition then into talking a little bit about once we've painted the problem and the promise, right? The promise is I have a number of solutions at my disposal in my content services platform, all of these different ECM tools from different vendors that can solve a bunch of different problems for me. So that's the promise. And the problem is that all of those things working together inside of one organization can create issues. Let's talk about how we then branch into solving some of that. Good always being the enemy of great, you can't just focus on, let's say, customer experience or, you know, are my applications performing and are they being properly adopted? You have to add to that an understanding of the behavior in the environment, because with that, I can start to take advantage of knowing behavioral anomalies, and those are really helpful from a security standpoint. And if I understand what users are doing, then I can help with audit as well. And that branches then into the topic of the rest of the conversation, which is around operations. So I can't just take any of these three pillars in a silo. I really need, in order to be great, I need to have a solution that covers all three of these different areas. And that's, as you might expect, where we fit. So let's talk a little bit about operations. And, you know, if content is king, operations is certainly critical. It was pretty easy to go out and find a stat for this one, quite frankly, because we all understand the growth at, you know, the pace at which content is growing. This particular one is quoting a 10 times growth from now until 2020, which is pretty staggering when you compare it against just the amount of content that already exists. So we have a problem that we are solving with our content services platform, and the problem that it is solving is expanding at a rate of 10 times. And there is a significant investment increase in ECM technology and content services technology by 2010 worldwide. So proactive visibility into that ever-expanding and more expensive infrastructure is pretty critical for these modern operations. So the areas of focus in this pillar that we're going to talk about need to include capacity and upgrade planning, and we'll talk more about each of these as we go through the rest of the presentation, along with private cloud visibility. And what we mean by that is increasingly organizations are offering all of these different content services in a private cloud form. And so with the multiple constituencies within an organization, there needs to be some level of slicing and dicing of the information that comes out. So why do we focus on planning? We focus on it because if we don't plan, then we find ourselves in poor availability situations where performance is quickly ratcheting down to significantly impact the experience of the users and the customers of our applications. So what we want to do, what Reveille does, is enable you to ask and get answers to a variety of different questions of your content services platform, of that collection of ECM products you have in your environment. So based on how things were running before the upgrade, am I better or worse? If I take a snapshot before and after, it's pretty easy for me to see if it was worthwhile me going through that upgrade, if I need to defend it or if I just need to understand it. When will I run out of capacity based on current usage and trends? Whether that be from a user perspective, how many users do I have across these different applications, whether it be from the number of applications I have, right? If my application stays steady and the number of users go up, or vice versa, or both of them go up, you know, in any of those different types of things, if I can snap those trend lines, I can see when I'm going to be getting availability and performance issues. So again, that if I add those users to the footprint, when will I see those issues? And what impact does each user or transaction have on my infrastructure, which can be quite interesting from a planning perspective. And since we can marry the user analytics that we're gathering with the operational analytics that we're gathering, we can make these determinations and allow these answers to be offered up. And so why would we then focus on private cloud visibility? And whatever you want to call it, whether it's private cloud, whether it's shared services, whether it's simply just IT offering a set of functions to their organization, you need business unit transparency, because you're not just offering it to a single person. You're offering it to the entire organization that are collected into groups, and you want to be able to have the visibility into which groups are using it more. If you have different service levels with different groups in your organization, you want to be able to report on that and do these content usage metrics. So who's using what kind of stress and load are they putting on the system? So how can I see performance and experience by groups of users, right? So it's not just performance, but it's overall experience. And how much did this group of users consume in a particular time frame? You can see that question being asked from a chargeback perspective. If I have matured to that level in my organization where I can go through and send bills internally to my constituents, this is a great, not only a great thing to have, but frankly, one that is required. So let's talk a little bit deeper about each one of these. So for capacity and upgrade planning, it's about seeing the present and predicting the future. And we have to continue to harvest all that information from these systems and pull it in and start doing some intelligent analysis on it. And then be able to visualize it. And you will see in the upcoming release, Reveille 8, which you're seeing screenshots for here today, that we've done a lot of work in the visualization front. And the reason is not just to put a prettier UI in front of anybody. The reason is because the amount of data that's flowing around, not just the content, but the amount of data, the amount of user analytics data, the amount of operational analytics data, et cetera, that's flowing around makes it crucially important to be able to properly visualize it so you can make the right decisions. Forecast capacity based on a number of different values and metrics or vectors. And because an organization doesn't grow simply by adding applications, simply by adding users, or simply by adding more infrastructure. Those things grow at different times and at different paces based on business requirements and needs, et cetera. So you have to be able to follow those things independently. And then from private cloud visibility perspective, being able to divide and report on consumption by line of business. And so being able to take a look at who is using it, what group they're coming into, what group they're a part of, and summarizing all of those together and providing that reporting data that is defendable. And being able to resource smarter. And if I have different service levels for different groups, then I need to know when a particular group's service level is starting to take a hit so that I can resource smarter, so that I can add either more people or more infrastructure or more capacity or whatever to the applications that they are using. So how do we do all of what we've walked through and what we've shown here so far? It's worthwhile taking in really this overall graph that I'll walk through to give an idea of where we fit and what we do. It can be a bit complicated at the front, so I'll direct your attention to the lower right-hand corner gray box. It says sources, because that's where it all starts. That's where all of this content is coming from, flowing through, being managed by, et cetera. And so you can see there that we have a representation of all the major players in the market, even as those major players shift and as the products flow between them and all of the consolidation and craziness that we see. You'll also see down there a representation of a group of users, and that's just an indicator that we're collecting not just information from the sources, from the infrastructure that supports those sources, but we're also gathering the user transaction information. And what Harvest is all about is pulling all that information out of all of those systems, and that's actually a pretty complicated process. It's not just going into Documentum and using their APIs, or Content Server, or Box, or SharePoint, and using their APIs to get information out. It's also going after their logs. It's also going after WMI in those environments. It's also going after a number of different access methods for gathering that data, right? So Harvest is a pretty complicated process, pulls a significant amount of information out and dumps it into our data store, where we begin to build context by analyzing it and by distilling it. And when we do that, we can react, or we can go in two different ways. So you can see the yellow line going both to visualize and act. When we find something happening that is bad, we can automatically react to it. So I can go directly from analyze to act and make something happen. We'll talk more about that in a second. But the other piece is now moving up into and creating that insight that now gets visualized. You saw examples of screenshots earlier in the presentation. Right. The visualization is a very key aspect, because there are new and expanded people that are interested in the data that we're gathering and the data that we're visualizing and what it means and those questions that we ask. So the visualization is a key and important part. And what you'll see in Reveille 8 is really an up-leveling of the UI that we give to our customers, such that it is something that's easy to use, it's flexible, it comes pre-configured, but also can be changed and updated, et cetera, and is available across all the different devices from which you might want to take a peek at it. When I visualize and I find something interesting, then what I do is either go, okay, everything's great, or in many cases I might need to react to that. And that's what the blue area is, right? Whether it's coming automated over from Analyze or whether it's coming manual down from Visualize, Act is pretty complicated too, because we need to encapsulate how to make things occur inside of those content services applications, the infrastructure, and other things around it. So if I have an example of finding that somebody is downloading too many documents, my reaction might be suspend their access. If I see that a batch is hung in Captiva, then I go inside the application and jiggle the handle to keep things flowing freely. If I see something on the content server side or on the FileNet side, and I recognize that not as a FileNet issue, though that's how it's manifesting, it's actually an application server issue, I can react by restarting that application server. So it's actually also a pretty complicated answer to the question. And all of these things working together in this constant circle, it's how we work, that's where we live and where we play. And it's required for all of these things because standard analytics will simply tell you what's happening. In order to have active insight, right, so you've got the insight with analytics. In order to have active insight, you have to have the ability to act, right? So adding that blue area is pretty critical. So as we come in for a close, just walking through what we've talked about, your content stack is complex already, and it's evolving. And as it evolves, it becomes more complex. Whether that means you're adding more on-premises vendors and repositories and other elements, or it means that you're branching out cloudward and going with, either brand new solutions from new vendors or new approaches from existing vendors. All of those different parts make it complex, which increases the chaos and challenges that you have to face every day. The general purpose tools that you have in place were a great decision and they're necessary, but they're not complete because they don't give you the context you need in order to get ahead of that fire, right, to go back to that analogy. Proactive visibility inside of modern operations is simply critical. If you don't have the visibility, and in order to get that visibility, you need to do more than just look at the outside of the house. Right? To get that visibility is pretty critical. Planning, or more specifically, a lack of it, can very much affect the availability and performance of the overall environment. Private cloud, you need to be able to slice and dice the usage data in any way necessary so that you can properly plan, properly charge, properly do a number of things in a mature IT organization. And this is pretty critical. Intelligence without action isn't useful. Another analogy that we like to throw around, there were a series of ads that came out, and one of them pictured a bank guard sitting there and telling everybody that the bank was being robbed, but wasn't going to do anything about it because all he's there to do is let you know when you're being robbed. Intelligence without action isn't useful, right? Knowing that you're being robbed isn't terribly helpful unless you have a way of preventing it. So I'll pause a moment. If you have any questions, I should have mentioned this at the start. Please make your way over to the Q&A window, and we'll work through a series of questions in the couple minutes that we have remaining. All right, so I'm seeing a question coming in here that's referring to, trying to paraphrase, which is basically you talk about capacity and upgrade planning and a number of different things specifically inside of the context of content services, but we have other things in play that work to do that at a higher level. And how do those things work together? Actually, I'll take that up a little bit higher to answer that Reveille exists inside of your existing ecosystem. We don't come in to replace a bunch of stuff that's already in play. So our overall solution has been created and architected such that it is set up to send information and live right alongside existing processes, existing tools, existing platforms, et cetera. So as things occur in the content services environment that need to be bubbled up inside of the existing way that your IT organization does business, it's no problem. We send the stuff up that way, and we make our platform externally available for both reading and writing into. All right. Well, I think that that will bring us to a close. We have a while I finish up, if there are any final questions, please do pose them. But I will simply close by saying thank you for your time. I hope this short presentation has been valuable in way of understanding where Reveille fits in the content services world. It concludes our three-part series on Active Insight for Content. And if you missed any of the priors, I would certainly invite you to our website to go take a peek at those, where we go through each of the three represent one of the three pillars that we talked about. There's customer experience, which is performance and app adoption. We have user behavior, which is security and audit, and then we have sustainable operations, which we just talked about today. The first two are already on the website. This third one will be done as soon as we can get it logistically posted up to the site. So I wish everyone a fantastic rest of your day and week. Thank you for joining us, and have a great one. Bye-bye.